And we're sitting here complaining about that vision, but instead of offering an actual alternative vision of our own, what do we actually stand for? What does it mean to be a Republican in the year 2024? What does it mean to be an American in the year 2024? To me, it means we believe in the ideals of 1776. We use words like America First. I'm an America First conservative. What does that mean? It didn't start in 2016. It started in 1776. It means we believe that a basic idea I'm going to deliver as your next president, that we the people create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. That the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. Not the shadow government and the deep state that runs the show today. So if there's one thing I get done as your next president, one war that I promise you I will wage, it isn't some pointless foreign war abroad. No, it is a war against our own shadow government right here in the United States of America. And that's a war we will win. You want to know how we drain the swamp? Here's how I'm going to do it. Fire 75% of the federal bureaucrats starting on day one when I'm in office. That is how you drain the swamp. Take government agencies that should no longer exist, from the FBI to the ATF to the CDC to the U.S. Department of Education. We're not just going to reform them anymore. That doesn't work. We will get in there and shut them down. That's how you revive our republic. Don't start with last year's budget as the baseline, which is based on the prior year's budget, which is based on the year's budget before that, all of which are corrupt and exactly how you get to a $34 trillion national debt. I will start with zero-based budget. That's how I run my businesses. We don't use last year's budget as the baseline. We start with zero as the baseline and ask what's actually necessary. That's how CEOs across this country run their businesses. That's how we need to run the federal government. That's how you take on our national debt crisis. This is how you drain the swamp. If I can't work for you for more than 8 years as your next president, which I think is a good thing, neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy instead of civil service protections. This is how you drain the swamp. There's one thing we get done. It's actually, I give my predecessor, Donald Trump, I see you remember his signs up here, I like him. He rolled that log over and we saw what crawled out. This time I'm bringing the pesticide. That's what it's going to take, actually. They duped him. Love the man, but they duped him. They said you can't fire those civil service employees, those bureaucrats, because of civil service protections. Read the law. Those civil service protections do not apply to mass firings. And yes, mass firings are absolutely, see, that is what it's going to take to actually gut that deep state. So that's the first thing. We the people create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. That means the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. And those people, this is number 2, they owe a duty. Myself, as your next president, owe you a duty. It is to the citizens of this nation, not any other one. America First doesn't come with an asterisk. What does that mean? I'm not going to send our military or our $200 billion of our taxpayer money so some Ukrainian kleptocrat can buy a bigger house. I was the first person to say that. Back then, they rejected me. They said, oh, this is crazy talk. You can't be talking like this. Now, quietly, they're coming back home to the basic idea that we should not be funding wars that don't advance our interest, increase the risk of World War III. Well, we're $34 trillion in the hole ourselves. Now, here's what I'm going to do as your next president. On day one, as your commander-in-chief, I will use our own military, direct our own troops, and move them to our own southern border and our northern border, too. That is how you stand for the rule of law in the United States of America and protect our own border. End foreign aid to any other country whose national debt per person is less than ours. End foreign aid to Central America, to Mexico. Require each of them instead to build a wall across each of their own borders from Venezuela to the northern border of Mexico. That's how you actually stop the flow. 80% of the people coming into this country from Mexico aren't actually from Mexico. They're from south of Mexico. We stop that flow, get to the root cause, move our own military to our southern border, finish the wall, use aquatic barriers, then our southern border is sealed. That's done by March of 2025 on my watch. And then we adopt the best border policies of all. Stop using our taxpayer money, our money, to pay sanctuary cities to pay for illegal migrants to enter their cities. End that waste of money. And then I go further than the rest of our party here, but it's the right thing to do. End birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals. It does not apply to them. Again, they duped my friend Donald Trump on this one. They said, oh, you need a constitutional amendment to do that. No. Read the Constitution. The 14th Amendment is clear. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. What do those words mean? It means if you're here illegally, your kids do not enjoy birthright citizenship. So if I swear an oath to the Constitution, I promise you I've read it so we can actually keep the oath and actually get the job done. And anybody who is in this country illegally on my watch, we're not going to hedge. They will be returned to their country of origin because that's what it means to stand for the rule of law in this country. Again, they say there's only 6,000 ICE agents. How could you do that? Answer. The existing laws already allow us to use local law enforcement to serve the warrants of ICE. All we need is a president that directs ICE to actually do it. So yes, I'm here to take our America First agenda to the next level. This does not belong to one man. It doesn't belong to Trump. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you, to us, to we the people in this country. And I don't think it's a lot to ask of this country. It's what our founding fathers asked. That the people we elect to run the government, and that they owe a duty to the citizens of this country, not another one. That's not a black idea or a white idea. It's not even really a Democrat idea or a Republican idea. It shouldn't be. These are American ideals that we fought a revolution in 1776 to secure. And I think we live in a 1776 moment right now. If you want somebody who's going to increase the tax rate by 1% here or decrease it 1% there and make some cosmetic changes, put Betsy DeVos on top of the Department of Education and go fix it and maybe say fire Christopher Wray, whatever that means, James Comey 2.0 comes along, I'm not your guy. But if you want to revive the ideals of the American Revolution, a government that is of the people, for the people, by the people, stand up to the threats to our sovereignty as a nation, from the WHO to the UN to the WEF, all the way to the threats to our individual sovereignty right here at home, from an overreaching government to a deep state to a central bank digital currency to an administrative police state that has lost its way, and actually do the hard thing, cut and cut deep, then nobody's going to get that done in the way that I am for you. And I want you to ask yourself why I'm the only candidate who can even tell you certain things, actually. I'm the only candidate in this race who can tell you that I will strip pharmaceutical companies of the special liability exemption for vaccine manufacturers. Yes. That's crony capitalism, and we have to have justice in this country. If the wrong was done, we have to set it right. The only person who can tell you that across the northern and western parts of this state, the CO2 pipeline using eminent domain to exploit the private property rights of farmers is wrong and unconstitutional, and that I'll put an end to it. And that it's based on a climate change agenda that absolutely is a hoax because it has nothing to do with the climate. To tell you that Ronna McDaniel, the failed chairwoman of our RNC, needs to step aside after 5 failed years of leadership. Accountability in our own party so we can then bring it to the government. The only person who can tell you that I will pardon every peaceful J6 protester on my first day in office because it's the right thing to do for this country. I can keep going on, but ask yourself why I'm the only candidate on or off that debate stage who can tell you these things. I'm not going to mess around and build a new building for the FBI that'll shut it down with a clear plan to do it. It's because every politician anymore is dancing to the tune of their biggest donor. It's like a fact. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, every politician's a pawn. In my case, my biggest donor is me. I don't report to them. I report to you, the citizens of this country, not another one. Frankly, I would rather speak the truth and lose this election than to win by playing some fake game of political snakes and ladders. I bet that's the winning strategy. I don't know. But if you want somebody who's actually going to shut down the deep state, actually going to speak truth to power, then vote for the candidate who is going to speak the truth to you. I'm going to close this out before we take questions with a hard truth. We're at the end of this process in Iowa. January 15th, every one of your voices and votes, it counts as the equivalent of 1 million people. Think about that, shaping who the next president is. So yes, you have a lot of, and it's why you're here today, and I know you understand that, don't need to hear it from me, a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to this country. I feel that sense of responsibility, and I know that every one of you does too. It's why you're here. I want you to see what I see. For those of you who are considering, actually, let's just be honest with you, Joe. I'll be very frank, you'll be frank. Just by show of hands, how many of you are currently inclined or planning to vote for me in the Iowa caucus? Some of you. How many of you are considering towards or leaning towards, like I have in the past, to vote for Donald Trump this time around? Good number of you. I think there's 2 America First candidates in this race. That's what it comes down to. But if you think they are going to let Donald J. Trump anywhere near that White House again, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. I think these people have now made clear, clearer than ever, that they will stop at nothing. And I mean nothing, to keep this man away from the levers of power again. If you believe you're doing something based on moral justice, that means you're unconstrained in what you're actually going to do. I've done everything in my power to fight it. I've sued the Biden administration through FOIA demands and otherwise, demanding what Biden and Merrick Garland told Jack Smith with those unjust prosecutions last year. I've stood against them at every step. They're threatening to remove Trump from the ballots from Colorado to Maine. And I've done my best to push back against that, saying every Republican needs to do the same thing if they're going to engage in this kind of election interference in our GOP primary. But all that's just last year. You have a system that will, now they've said, okay, civil lawsuit number 1, prosecution, state prosecution, federal prosecution number 2. Now avoid the judicial system altogether, just remove the man from the ballot. That's just last year. We're not going to look back a year from now and say, oh, are we shocked by what happened, whatever it is? It's about to happen this year. We're not going to say we were shocked. We're going to say we should have seen that coming. Do not fall for their trap. They are selling us the rope today that they will use to hang us tomorrow. And as a patriot, as somebody who loves this country, I cannot just watch that as a passive bystander playing out. They want to narrow this to a 2-horse race. That's what they're planning for. And take Trump out of contention. We can't walk into that trap. We love the man because he got this fight started. But it is our job now to finish it. You got the future of America First standing right here. We owe this to our founding fathers, to George Washington, to this country, to make sure we have another 250 years and then some left. It cannot come to an end this year. So I'm asking you to do the right thing for this country on January 15th, even if it's a little different than what you might have thought about doing even 3 months ago. And if you all do your part, I promise you, my family and I, my wife Apurva and I, we will do ours. We will stop at nothing to make sure, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, to make sure that our country's best days are actually still ahead of us. Thank you for coming today, guys. We're going to open this up. Thank you for the warm welcome. And
I have a question on immigration. You talked about that in your speech here.
Sure.
Obviously, we need a border.
Yes.
But I have a question about what we're going to do with the people who are here illegally. I see two groups. One group who have been here for a number of years with a DACA program, that we know who they are.
Yep.
But the other group is the people that are coming in now illegally that we do not know anything about.
Yes.
So what is your solution for these two groups?
Sure, thank you. What's your name?
Mary?
Mary. So, I think they need to be treated separately, but I think the answer in the first step is the same for both. I say this, I'm a father of two sons. I can't raise those two sons in the White House, look them in the eye and tell them they have to follow the rules if our own government isn't following its own rules. If there's one thing about being American, we're a nation founded on the rule of law. I mean, there's basic ideals, free speech, open debate, free to practice your religion, and we're a nation of laws, not of men. If we abandon the rule of law now, I think we've abandoned the rule of law for posterity. So the right thing on the time scale of history is that anybody who's in this country illegally must be returned to their country of origin. And then for the subset who have demonstrated themselves through DACA or otherwise to be law-abiding citizens and have the ability to make contributions to this country, that we would have wanted them here anyway through a legal immigration program, we can then turn to step two of certain reforms to the legal immigration program that would allow a certain number of them back in through the lawful process. But we've got to go in that order. Otherwise, what are we saying to the millions of people who are waiting to come to this country legally? I mean, it's degrading, frankly, to people like my own parents and uncles and family members. People maybe many of you know who have come to this country legally through the front door, millions more waiting to do it the right way. It's degrading to our national identity here at home, breaking the rule of law, and it's degrading to those who actually want to be part of this country in the right way. And so, yes, we will use Section 287G of the law to deputize, that is to say, allow local law enforcement to serve the warrants of ICE. Now it's not 6,000 ICE agents anymore. It's 1 million local law enforcement, close to 1 million local law enforcement in this country, to go after likely a number that's close to 7 to 8 million in this country. And a country that put a man on the moon then can still get that job done. And so by the end of 2025, I'll say first of all, by March of 2025, we will have the border sealed by everything I told you. Military on the border, seal the southern border, aquatic barriers, end funding for sanctuary cities. We'll end birthright citizenship for illegals starting on day one when I'm in office. All that is done in the first couple of months that I take over. But by the end of 2025, using 287G and otherwise, we will have mass deportations well underway, and then we actually come back and stand for the rule of law in this country. That's my answer to your question.
I think lawfare is going to be one of the biggest hurdles you're going to have to climb over to discard this administrative state.
Yes.
What's your plan?
So it starts with abandoning this illusion we sometimes have, good people even in our Republican Party, who believe that we can reform this apparatus. It cannot be reformed. When a cancer metastasizes so broadly, you can't just pick out one of the tumors. So I was referring to earlier, some people in the Republican Party, it's acceptable within the bounds of the Republican establishment to say, fire Christopher Wray. And so when the acceptable bounds of what a corporate sponsor candidate can say is only so wide, then the way they differentiate themselves is how vigorously they say it. You know, look at the camera, I'll fire Christopher Wray, and then pause for applause, and we all move on, and it's all cosmetics. It doesn't work. As I said earlier, you got James Comey 2.0 that comes along. If you want to get serious about this, the right answer starts with shutting down the FBI, the failed Bureau of Investigation in the United States. This goes back to J. Edgar Hoover. 70 years on in, this is still as corrupt an institution as it was when Hoover led it. Why would we expect it to be anything different? The left has actually complained about the FBI's abuses for years. Now suddenly they believe at this unique moment in history, suddenly it gets everything right when it's going after people of different political ideology. No. The right answer is we have to get in there, gut it, shut it down. Now, this isn't just a slogan. There's a clear plan that we have to do this. I'll go into detail like I did to the last question. And I'm glad you guys are asking detailed questions. There's 35,000 employees at the FBI. 20,000 of them are back office bureaucrats. at the J. Edgar Hoover building, still what they call the headquarters, tells you a lot. The J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C. They're going to go home on my watch and find honest work in the private sector. 15,000 of them are investigative agents, cops on the front lines. We will move them to the U.S. Marshals, to the DEA, both of which have been far more effective at fighting child sex trafficking rings or the fentanyl epidemic than has been the FBI. We'll move them to places like the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury, far more effective with more specialization to go after complex white-collar crime like the future SBFs or the FTXs and fraudsters of the world. So we will at once improve effectiveness while also ending the corruption. But you have to start with the willingness to actually shut down those agencies in the first place. At the DOJ, we will turn over not just the Attorney General, but every U.S. attorney and every assistant U.S. attorney, and bring in fresh lifeblood of people who actually swear an oath to the Constitution rather than the operating manual of the Department of Justice guidelines that have themselves been corrupted over the course of the last 10 to 20 years in this country. So that's how you drive change. That's sounds frightening to a lot of people. I say shut down the Department of Education. I know that's not lawfare, but it's about the administrative state still. Well, what's going to happen to education in this country? I favor shutting down the FBI because I favor the rule of law, not because I'm against it. I favor shutting down the Department of Education because I am for improvement of education in this country, not because I'm against it. The $80 billion that they spend will be returned to parents across this country who deserve to determine where they send their kids to school. That's how we improve education in this country, and God forbid something like what happened in Perry, Iowa happen ever again in this country, but it's happened so many times over. For a tiny fraction of that budget of the U.S. Department of Education, we could put 3 armed security guards in every school across this country. I've said this all along, and I said it after the tragedy in Perry as well. So this is the kind of change I'm bringing to Washington, D.C. It is not incremental change. If you want incremental change, I'm not your candidate. But if you want the kind of lasting change we need to revive a country with 3 branches of government, not 4, a country that would make George Washington and Alexander Hamilton and John Jay and Thomas Jefferson proud if they were here today. Today, if they're walking the streets of Washington, D.C., our founding fathers would be appalled. They would be aghast. They would ask us, what have you done? But if you want to revive what would make our founding fathers proud in this country, 3 co-equal branches of government, with a justice system that stands for one standard of the rule of law, that's what I will deliver. And that's why I've said on day one, this is to send a signal to the country. Most presidents wait for their pardons to the very last day that they're in office because they don't want accountability for it. No, on day one, I want the accountability for it. Every peaceful J6 protester, Julian Assange, Douglas Mackey, Donald Trump, every one of these individuals will get a pardon on day one when I'm in office. It says we have one standard of the rule of law, regardless of your political beliefs, regardless of your skin color. That is what the United States of America is founded on, and that is what I'm going to revive as your next president. Technically, we have power to be clemency for him, but yes, you have a quick follow-up, and then I want to go to this gentleman.
The lawfare, what I'm referring to is the way they tied Trump's hands.
Yes.
So many times. What's your strategy for that? Because there's going to be lawsuits, there's going to be
Sure.
injunctions.
So I want to say something. Great questions. So when I shut down those agencies, are they going to sue? First of all, they will. There's the Presidential Reorganization Act of 1977, which says that under certain circumstances, the president already has the power to shut down those agencies. If it promotes the economy, if it promotes efficiency of operations in government, or if it promotes, eliminates redundant agencies. Those are 3 of the criteria. The president already has the power to do it. So I haven't promised to shut down the SEC or the FDA, though I would prefer to. But I can't do that without Congress. These agencies I've named, I can. They're going to sue us on the mass firings. They're going to say you couldn't fire those employees. The current Supreme Court agrees with me 6-3 on everything I'm telling you. That's the Supreme Court that gave us West Virginia versus EPA last year. That said that regulations from the EPA that Congress never actually gave them the power to pass, if those are unconstitutional, most federal regulations right now, I'm not using that as an exaggeration, literally most federal regulations are unconstitutional. So I think we require a president who understands that. And this requires a president, I'll just say this for a second because you all have such an important choice for this country to make in about 9 days at the Iowa caucus. This requires a president who, yes, comes from the outside, with sharp elbows, willing to break glass when necessary. And for those who've been following this campaign or the debates or whatever, you know I have that. You know Trump brought that in 2016 too. But it also takes a president, and I'm the only one who brings this, who knows and deeply understands the law and the Constitution of this country. And those two things don't usually go together. That's the thing. That's where they got Trump. They duped him. Right? You got the business guy that's going to try to have the right intentions, but you can walk into a bull in a China shop and break things, and that's necessary sometimes. And I'm going to bring that too. But the nerdy law professor or the academic type or whatever sitting over here can't get anything done. Those two things don't usually go together in the same person. And that's what draws me, gives me my sense of duty to do what we're doing now and to lead this country. And my faith teaches me God puts each of us here for a purpose. That He's working through us, and it is our duty to achieve and realize that purpose in the short time that we're given, to use the God-given gifts. Every one of us has our own unique God-given gifts. But it is our duty to use them in the short time that we're given to do what is right. And I believe I'll be able to do that in a way that respects Donald Trump and his legacy. I don't want to, yes, they used lawfare against him, and he struck the swamp struck back. There's a lot of lessons to learn. I'm not going to bash him for that. I'm going to respect him for that. But to build on that legacy, to actually gut the entire apparatus this time around, using the law and the Constitution to do it. That's what it's going to take to get the job done, sir. Thank you. I appreciate the question. We're going to go right in.
If I stand, sir?
Yeah, don't mind at all. Yeah, it's good to conceive.
Vivek, I seen you over in Cresco. I gave you a book, approximately 70 pages on federal laws for veterans' disability.
Yes.
I hear what you're saying about the law. I just want you to know, which I'm sure you do, we have a constitution, we have a supremacy clause, we have federal laws,
Yes.
and we have state laws.
Yes.
I gave you a book that was approximately 70 pages on federal laws which are violated in the state of Iowa across the country. I have 180 cases. I just wanted to give you a letter to show you the in-depth of this. I went to the Secretary of the VA. By federal law, 38511, it says the Secretary has finality over any state when it comes down to where these veterans' benefits are being allocated,
Yep.
okay? We went to the Supreme Court of the United States with Howell versus Howell. I know the lawyer who spent 35 years in JAG, Carson Tucker. What came out of that ruling was a state cannot vest what a state is not vested in. These are federal benefits. A long time ago, we had state benefits because they had militias, they paid bounties. Now the federal government took over. The first benefits bill ever written says wholly, W-H-L-L-Y, wholly for the officer and soldier entitled. That's singular. What's happening now is you have like the Wild Wild West out here.
Yep.
Everybody's coming after these disabled veterans and they're saying, well, the law doesn't mean this, or we can't take your benefits, but we can calculate your benefits. We're playing lawyers' tricks and end arounds. But I wanted to present this to you today, sir, and I
Thank
know
you.
it's a little rough shape, but this is a letter from the Secretary of the VA that we took because he is the one in charge of Title 38 of the federal law. This is the answer from Congressman Massa and Secretary Shinseki. Okay, this was a letter from the Congressman to the Secretary. And if you read this, I know it's a little smaller than the 60-page, but
Well, I actually remember this was early in the
Yeah.
campaign. I do remember
Yes, sir.
that. And actually, I didn't read the whole book. I have to admit that, but I actually did look through it right after you gave it to me. When we're on the bus ride.
yes, sir.
And I want to say a few words about at least, it's not the specific topic in this letter, which I promise you, when people give me something, I learn a lot from this campaign, and I will read this on our next bus ride. I want to make sure we do.
Appreciate it.
But I want to say a word about veterans benefits as a broader topic. And I can't remember whether this came from what you gave me or not, because so many veterans have come to our events and I've learned a lot from them. But we adopted comprehensive veterans policies for that. I think I'm the only candidate to have released it, but much of this should be nonpartisan. So let me give you some basic changes I want to deliver to stand for our veterans. A country that doesn't stand for its veterans isn't really a country. And we're not standing for our veterans right now. This is a country without borders isn't a country. We're not standing for our borders right now. So my number one obligation to those who serve this country is to make sure that if you, God forbid, are ever put in harm's way, or we take the risk of putting you in harm's way, it is to protect the citizens of this nation, not another one. You have 40,000 troops sitting in places like Germany, which doesn't even spend 2% of its own GDP on military expenditures, as NATO itself requires. Those troops belong on our own southern border. So that's the number one form of respect to active duty military and our veterans. Now, how do we honor those who have served this country in the past who are failing to respect today in our VA system? I'm going to give you some basic. This is not comprehensive. We release comprehensive policy, but these are examples. 6-week paid decompression buffers when a veteran comes back from an active duty role before being thrust back into civilian life. If you do that in third-party location, PTSD goes down by about 80%. That's staggering. Basic changes like privacy laws that allow veterans to report their PTSD, which many aren't doing today because they're afraid of being tagged with a red flag law. No veteran should be afraid to report their PTSD. Veterans shouldn't have to drive 120 miles or more to the nearest VA center. They should be able to get basic medical care through the community-based medical care that they get paid for still by the VA. I believe veterans deserve absolute medical choice for Schedule I drugs, including psilocybin and ayahuasca and otherwise, which are far better to address PTSD than where they're turning today. Fentanyl and suicide, close to 40 of our veterans per day, committing suicide in the United States of America. That's unacceptable. I come from the private sector. I've been a CEO. I'm going to restructure the VA to make sure that our veterans are treated like the shareholders of the VA. The shareholders set the pay of a company's CEO, decide who's hired and fired at the top. Well, that should be the case with veterans with respect to the VA. And on my watch, I will favor every veteran and every active duty military member to make sure their compensation and their benefits are no longer subject to federal taxation. That is what it means to actually stand for our own veterans in this country. So there's examples of our
I'm not trying to take up too much of your time. The problem with the VA is you have a VA secretary that's not a lawyer, but you have a general counsel that are the lawyers, but they're not the top-notch lawyers. So what's happening to the laws is you have a general counsel that's being manipulated with the state agencies, or the word is colluding. What we need is a voice.
Somebody's actually knowledgeable about the law.
Oh, sir, I went to the Library of Congress. I went through the first benefits bill to the last. I went through every amendment. And like I said, sir, I had the Secretary of the VA.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I think it's just, and this issue has been the VA. I met at truckers at Walcott, Iowa. The administrative agency in the Department of Transportation that oversees truckers has never been run by somebody who's actually ever been behind the wheel, but is run by a back office bureaucrat. Same thing with respect to across the board. Even the Department of Agriculture, otherwise, the people who have run it have systematically been the people who hadn't the first clue about the laws or the substance of what they're regulating. So,
Thank you, sir.
you have my word on that, and I think that I'll take a look at this.
Thank you, sir.
Please take a look at our comprehensive veteran policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I saw your hand up.
Oh.
I actually have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's allowed.
My friends in central Indiana, I told them I was going to go see you. They have a question.
That's allowed.
Greenfield,
Non-Iowans can ask
Indiana.
questions too. I grew up not far from there. Where are they in central Indiana, do you know?
Greenfield.
In Greenfield. Like, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I used to tell them I used to spend my summers in Bedford, Indiana.
Well, Indianapolis is my hometown.
Okay, good.
And it's turned into a shit city. Because
Like so many cities across this country. And I've been there, and I can confirm what you just said.
Yeah, no, even the cops don't want to work there.
We can turn this around, but I want to make sure I'm respectful of your question.
Okay, they are Trumpers, big time. What they'd like to know is, would you consider being vice president? I know, but I think the vice president should have more authority. They should, I don't know.
Well, they always said,
The second
Dick Cheney was one heartbeat away, that George Bush was one heartbeat away from the White House, is what they said back in the day, but that's a side joke. So I'll answer their question head on, if I may. And I've been to events like this where some of you have come out, not in this room, but people in the state. It's happened about 3 or 4 times in the last few weeks, where somebody said they came in with that question and then left asking whether I would consider Trump as my vice president. And you know what? I said I would. I don't think he would take it. But I think that what the heart of that question is, and I'll tell you for my part, I can answer this honestly, is this shouldn't be about ego. We're in this for the country. It is our duty to this country to do whatever's our best role to serve this country at a moment where we're not working with a lot of time. I mean, if my kids are in high school before we get this right, I don't think we have a country left. If the interest payments on our national debt become the largest line item in our federal budget, that's about 5 years from now. I don't think we have a country left. And so when I've got questions like this, or would you consider running in 2028 because we love Donald Trump? Any of that works for me. I don't think it works for our country. Because right now,
I think Trump needs help.
well, I think our country needs help. And I think that I will take Donald Trump's help. I think I would need help. I've said I would take Trump as my advisor, as my top advisor during my first year in office, because I want to know where the bodies are buried. When I think about where we are as a country right now, we're in the middle of a war in this country right now. I don't use that word lightly. It is a war between those of us who love this country and a fringe minority who hates this country and wants to see it cease to exist. A war between the permanent state and the everyday citizen, between the Great Reset and the Great Uprising. That is the war that we face in this country right now. And so think about, if you want a general to lead us to victory in that war, the commander-in-chief, I think we have to pick somebody who is not currently wounded in that war. If I was 80 years old and had 4 different wounds and counting, I wouldn't tell you to put me in the role of commander-in-chief either. So I think each of us has our role to play. And so my word to you all is, whatever we do, we'll wipe the floor in Congress or the White House or wherever else across this country. That's how I believe I'll have my maximal change that I can make for this country. And it's not going to be some president coming from on high like a messiah to save all of us from the White House. It doesn't work that way. If we're going to be saved, it's going to be because we save ourselves. Every one of us has our role to play. But I believe right now in this moment, we require a president who understands the law and the Constitution, and somebody with a brawn to actually see it through and stand for it. Somebody, I believe, now more than ever with fresh legs.
So is that a maybe?
That's I'll be very honest, because you guys get to know me. I have a mental defect, and I'll share it with you. It's worked in my favor so far. I've built successful businesses, and you guys should know that if a president has a mental defect, you deserve to know about it. I'm not a Plan B person. I didn't get to where I am by being a Plan B person, but I couldn't even be one if I tried. I'll tell you what's true in my heart. I believe we're going to win the Iowa caucus. I believe if I win the Iowa caucus, I'm going to be your next president. I believe if I'm your next president, the things I'm telling you we're going to get done. The beautiful thing about nearly everything I've told you we're going to get done, I think everything I've told you we're going to get done, that I get to do as your president without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness. And so that's what I'm going to be able to do. And I'll give you my word that Donald Trump, I will use him and rely on him in whatever way is best. He's going to be in his 80s. I want him as an advisor. I want to honor his legacy for this country. But I think if we're in the middle of this war, we're skating on thin ice. I don't think we're going to have a country left unless we have the president who gets this right. And the other thing I would ask you to tell your friends is what I told this group earlier. Were you here earlier, ma'am, or have you been here since the start? I want you to tell them what I said earlier, which is the truth. They're leading us into a trap right now. They want this to be. They don't want, the establishment does not want me in this race. They want to get this down between Donald Trump and a puppet. And I have a strong sense of who that puppet is. Used to think it was Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever. It's actually within our own party. They want to get this to be a 2-horse race, eliminate Trump this spring, one way or another. Study history. Study global history, study the history of this country, study the history of the last 4 years, study the history of the last 4 months. And open your eyes. I am not God. I cannot tell you what the future holds, but I can tell you what I see. And I'm asking you to open your eyes with me to see that this system is making clear to us they will not allow this man anywhere near office. And we cannot fall into that trap. There's a trap that's laid for us. 4 years ago, it was a man-made pandemic and a tech-rigged election and process leading up to it. What do you think they're going to do this time? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We are walking into that trap, and I am here to make sure. And I'm asking you not to throw away your vote at the Iowa caucus, to actually think ahead, to skate to where the puck is going. You've got the future of America First standing right here. You've got fresh legs. You've got the guy who, and I have a good relationship with Donald Trump. We will honor his legacy more than anybody else. I would go so far as to say, if you want to save Trump and his legacy, but save Trump the man himself, I'm going to ask you to vote for me. And I know that's counterintuitive, but that's what this country requires. And I think that's why I'm going to stay in this, not only through this Iowa caucus, but through the very end. And the very end isn't the winning of just this election. It's January 2033, after we've led this country after 2 terms, and we revive who we really are. That's my duty to this country. And I thank you and your friends. Thank you. Well, that's what we sometimes have to do, is open our eyes. I didn't think this way about a year ago either, but you go through this process, it opens your eyes. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And then the question is, to whom do you owe the obligation? It's not to me and it's not to Trump. It's to this country, it's to our founding fathers, and it's to the next 250 years left that this country still has left in it, to make sure it does not end in the next 12 months that we're sitting right in front of. And I think that's what we're facing if we don't get this
How
right.
about the pedophiles in the country?
That's a whole separate issue. But I think that they need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. A lot of them are using the southern border to do this. First of all, anybody in the Jeffrey Epstein client list, just release the whole darn thing. Just tell us the truth for once and for all in this country. You asked an important question, and so I can't not mention the most important part of this, but it's a longer conversation, is we have a pornography problem in this country. It's a demand side issue too, so it's not just going after the whack-a-mole of the criminals here. We got to do that. We're not even doing that now. And the U.S. Marshals has been far more effective than the FBI, which goes to my earlier question. Shut down the FBI, move the cops to the U.S. Marshals. But we have to deal with an issue that begins with our schools, begins with our culture, begins with the modern internet. Kids under the age of 16 should not be using addictive, algorithmically powered social media products under the age of 16, period. And I will stand for that. It's not a Democratic proposal or a Republican one. These should be ideals that every parent, every adult in this country should stand for, as protecting our children, the next generation. That's our job, not just as parents, but as citizens. Sir, we'll come to you.
I just feel so blessed that
Thank you.
that you and the Republican Party are positioned the way that they are. And this isn't really a question, but you talk about 8 years from now and serving for 8 years, and I think that is awesome. And I think whoever works with you, if you're the president, could serve another 8 years after that. Unfortunately, Donald Trump, even if he were elected, can only serve 4 years, and I think the Republican Party is at a point right now where they need to take control and do exactly what you're saying. So I just thank you so much for what you're saying.
I appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you. You live in this community? Yeah. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. We'll come to our Penguins fan here.
Yes, Mr. Ramaswamy, in the debates, you have stood out from the other people on stage because your policies on Ukraine, your thoughts on Ukraine. If Ukraine ends up going the route of Georgia and Crimea, who do you think Putin is going after next? And is it a NATO ally, and is that World War III?
So let me address the question on Ukraine. Thank you for asking. I think that we deserve, there's 2 divides in the Republican Party, basically, ideological divides. One is foreign policy, role in places like Ukraine. The other is commitment to the Constitution, especially free speech. And I'm happy to address the other one, but I'll address this one first. So this war doesn't advance our interests because it's actually increasing the risk we do face, which is the Russia-China military alliance. Russia is in a military alliance with China. Those 2 countries actually together outmatch us. Russia's nuclear stockpiles and hypersonic missile capabilities are ahead of the U.S. China's Navy is bigger than ours, as measured by number of ships. And we depend on China's economy, shamefully, for our modern way of life. From our pharmaceuticals to on our own military equipment. Actually, is made in China. It's a dirty little secret they don't advertise often. So our policies in Ukraine, it's not just that we're wasting, as though this is bad enough, $200 billion of our own taxpayer money that should be better used in defending our own border rather than some part of Ukraine's. But that we're driving Russia further into China's hands at a moment where the Russia-China alliance is the biggest risk that we face. I would go in reverse. I would end the war in Ukraine on reasonable terms that allow Ukraine to come out with its sovereignty intact, which may not even be the track that Ukraine's on right now, actually, where that's half in, half out. I would end the war diplomatically on reasonable terms that allow Ukraine to come out with its sovereignty intact. Yes, there will be some territorial negotiations in the eastern part of Ukraine. We'll make a hard commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. But Putin does not get that for free. I will also require that Putin exit his military alliance with China. That's a deal that Putin would do. It's a deal that we should do. Now, I also want to state some hard facts about Ukraine because I do believe that we have been misled by the mainstream media and most of the Republican Party. It's been framed in that first presidential debate. Nikki Haley derided me and called it a battle between good and evil. Well, let's double click on that a little bit. Ukraine is not some model democracy. They've banned 11 opposition parties. They have consolidated all media to one state TV media arm. Zelensky's with the Canadian Parliament praising some Nazi in his own ranks. They've banned the Ukrainian Orthodox Church using our taxpayer money to persecute Christians in their own country. The eastern regions of Ukraine, the 3 provinces that apparently the Republicans that want to fight for, they can't even tell you what they are. Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, the 3 provinces in eastern Ukraine, they have not even been represented in the Ukrainian parliament for the last 10 years. And they're trying to ban Russian as a language. And the reason those regions are occupied is that most people who live there didn't view themselves as part of Ukraine. So there was no counterinsurgency like in Kyiv, where there was. So against that backdrop, are we going to fight this war for these regions that basically haven't even been part of Ukraine or not part of Ukraine? The people who live there don't view it as part of Ukraine? Do you believe in democracy or don't you? The question is, what advances American interests? And so the answer that advances American interests is spined diplomacy. Diplomacy with a spine. End the war. Ukraine comes out with its sovereignty intact. Break apart the Russia-China alliance. I would even reopen some economic relations with Russia in that context. And keep in mind, this is about standing for our own word in this country. What the mainstream media doesn't tell you is that James Baker, our Secretary of State, in 1990 made a commitment to Gorbachev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union, that NATO would expand it not 1 inch. That was the commitment, not 1 inch past East Germany. NATO has expanded far past that, more after the fall of the USSR than it did before. Now, nobody in today's broken foreign policy establishment, from the John Boltons to the Karl Roves to the Joe Bidens to the Lindsey Grahams to the Nikki Haleys of the world, I don't think they have the first clue of actually what I'm telling you right now. All they know is they want to keep the war machine humming because it's almost a reflex, a native muscle memory built in places like Iraq. Iraq and Afghanistan, we wasted $7 trillion of our national debt is due to those 2 wars. Thousands of our sons and daughters dying in those 2 wars. And 20 years later, the Taliban, for God's sake, is still in charge in Afghanistan. And Iraq is a more broken country than when we showed up. So I refuse to make those same mistakes. But it's going to take a president with an actual vision for our foreign policy of how we advance American interests. Is that isolationism? No, it's not. It's looking at every context, every conflict through the lens of what advances the American interest. And you know what? This will actually make China less likely to go after Taiwan. And I'll explain why. Xi Jinping's bet right now is that the U.S. won't want to fight 2 different allied nuclear superpowers, Russia and China, at the same time because they're in an alliance. But if Russia's no longer in China's camp, Xi Jinping then absolutely has to think twice before going after Taiwan. And Taiwan matters to us in a way that Ukraine doesn't, in part because we depend on Taiwan for the little chips that power our phones or these fans or these lights or our modern way of life. So I look at every conflict through the lens of my obligation, which is to you, not to some Ukrainian kleptocrat who wants to use your money to buy a bigger house, which is what they're using our money to do today. So I know there was a lot there in that answer, but there's a lot in your question, and so I hope that addresses it. That's what it means to lead, not just with slogans, but with a clear vision for how we will end this war in a manner that advances American interests and puts Putin in a position that wouldn't be in his interest, and he wouldn't have the capability to take another step after that because it's backstopped by a guarantee with the U.S. pulling him apart from China. Hope that addresses it. Your follow-up?
We do.
Last question right here.
Quick one. Your follow-up? You good?
No,
Good?
no,
Okay,
no.
good.
Last question.
Good. Last question right here. Okay. Okay. Well, how about we go here and give you the final word? Let's go.
Okay.
She had her hand up.
2 quick
Just
things.
give me the 2 quick. I'll
Okay.
take you together and you get the final word, of course.
I
have a question as well.
All right. Give it. I'm gonna go rapid fire. Did Schultz already go to the next site?
We'll take care of it.
Send Matt to the next site. I'm having too much fun with these guys. This is not the usual kinds of. I hate check the box questions. I like details, and so We're having fun here. Sir, and then I'll go to you, and then.
Okay.
Thank you. I didn't plan to just stand up and do this.
That's
But
okay.
I had to, because I gotta voice my opinion, and now is the time.
Amen.
Let me gather myself.
You want me to go here and then come back to you?
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Let me do that. Let's go to this woman right here. We'll come back to you.
All right, first, we know the media tells lies. Is there anything you can do to make sure the truth comes out for all
Yes.
people? And with winning the election, how do you think you will win the election when we know there's voter fraud?
Okay, so let me answer two deep questions. I'll go quick. First and shortest thing I'm doing is at least calling out the media's lies on their own turf. I'm not just going to call it the fake news media. And Trump did a lot. He kind of unearthed the problem. You got to dissect. I mean, they're devious, right? The premises they'll come to you with are baked into the premise of you. I don't know, you can't see this exchange. I had this with this pathetic Washington Post reporter the other day about a Steve King endorsement. You guys know who Steve King is? Good man. He's a good Iowan. Wrongly tarred by the media as some kind of, they call him a racist or white supremacist. It's all garbage. You think it's a white supremacist going to endorse a guy by the name of Ramaswamy who looks like this? It doesn't make any sense. People don't think. We do not denounce racism. I said I denounce invidious racism because racial discrimination is wrong in this country. But you haven't denounced white supremacy. Well, if you could tell me what white supremacy is, maybe I could tell you whether I denounce it. But the left is telling you that it's being on time. Punctuality is white supremacy. The written word is white supremacy. I'm not making this up. There's a museum at the Smithsonian that says exactly delineates the markers of white supremacy. So part of the way I'm doing this is by not hiding from the media. A lot of Republicans have fallen into this trap, so they only talk to friendly networks or pre-script their settings. You have other candidates in this race that won't, pre-screen exactly who's in this room. I promise you wouldn't pre-screen the questions. There's no fake planted questions. Most of the other campaigns, I don't think you all know this, but before they come in, I've been very carefully, you have a number of journalists that were removed from Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley's events even in the last couple of days. We don't do that. Because if I'm going to sit across the table from Xi Jinping, I better be willing to sit across the table from Don Lemon. Who, by the way, after he sat across the table from me, we got to fire for making a fool of himself. And that's how we show up and win. So that's the way I look at that. The second point is on the election. So I didn't mention this before. I didn't mention this before because the promises I make are the promises that, in my case, I can get done without Congress. I'll get it done as your next president without asking anybody for permission or for forgiveness. What I will deliver legislatively as your next president, it's my top legislative priority, is single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots, government-issued ID to match the voter file, and English as the sole language that appears on a ballot. I will deliver that to you as your next president. So then she asked a smart question, but how are you going to get there first? I'm a civilian right now. I'm a businessman. I can't change that till I get in there. Goes to your Indiana friend's question in part two. This can't be a 50.1 election. This has to be a Reagan 1980 style moral mandate. And a landslide minus some shenanigans is still a victory. That's the hard answer. We're riding on broken rails. I'm bringing young people into our movement at a scale we have not seen in our party's history. We're bringing libertarians and others along who stand for the same liberty-oriented principles that we do, but haven't thought of themselves as traditional Republicans. That is what it's going to take. A landslide minus a margin. What's that?
How do you know they won't cheat? They do.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. I think I am the best chance we have. I would love to tell you it's all going to be honky-dory. It's morning in America. The American dream is alive and well. It's not. It's alive and hanging on for life support. But we've got a number of months to get this right in this country, and I am in this because I believe I am the single best suited person in this country to get this job done, or else I wouldn't be standing in front of you here. So can I guarantee anything to you? I told you I'm not God. You got to know you believe in God. First step is knowing you're not it. We can't pretend the future, but we can each do our part, and I believe I am best suited than anybody else in this race to see through a landslide Reagan 1980 moral mandate. My heart tells me we will succeed in doing it. But it's our job to make sure we don't fall into their trap, see where the puck is going, and actually do the right thing for this country. Sir, if you'd like to briefly ask your question.
Please.
Thank you.
So basically, I'm here all day so I have plenty of time to ask you. But I had to make my presence known right away at the beginning of your day,
Okay, well, thank you.
because I'm here to ask a lot of hard questions.
Give me your top one, because I want to be respectful of the other two people here.
I'm not even gonna ask you a question right now. I don't have time
Okay, fair
for
enough.
it, and you don't have time for it.
Well, thank you, sir, and appreciate you being here, and,
But I'm going to qualify myself.
okay.
One of your top policies is about qualifications, this whole DEI program.
End it.
So, when I say this to you, this will show everybody else the truth.
Okay.
Okay? I'm here to qualify myself to speak for you, to reach people that is impossible for you to reach. When I communicate to people I know, it doesn't matter what I say about you. And I want you to know, I probably know you best because I listen to you nonstop since I decided to follow you.
I appreciate that. So what's your name?
Justin McCauley.
Justin, thank you. I appreciate your support. and
One
having
last
followed me.
thing.
Thank you.
One last thing is I'm a product of this society, of the United States that we live in. My entire family are products of the American indoctrination program, and I have proof my entire family is part of it. And I know you speak truth.
It's up here. For
Okay, I believe in you 1,000,000,000%. I'm here to ask the hard questions because the first thing people tell me is, who, that young brown guy?
And I appreciate that, Justin. And I'll tell you, anybody who's new and skeptical of a new guy, be skeptical initially. That's fair. You should be. That's what the last few years have taught us. But at some point, we have a decision to make for our country. And I'm going to ask you to just open your eyes and do the right thing for our nation. I appreciate your kind words. I promised this woman a question, and then we're going to give you the final word.
Okay, I'm
Briefly.
really pro-life. I want to know what.
Pro-life
Right.
views.
Good. And I want to know what you think about the United Nations, because when I watch some of the stuff that they do, they
Okay.
are bringing anti-life.
Again, two big
to other
questions.
countries. So-
And they are spreading the anti-life movement to other countries. So I'm solidly pro-life. I believe unborn life is life, and we have to stand for that. There's a temptation now in the Republican Party where they're saying, oh, we got to back off this issue, we're going to lose the general election. No. The way we're actually going to win is by standing more strongly for our principle. There's so much I could say, but I'm going to give you one example of something that I favor, that I think is a winner for us, and it is consistent, deeply consistent with my pro-life position. Yeah, we're talking about access to contraception, child pregnancy, crisis pregnancy centers, to child care, to adoption. I'm going to give you one we haven't talked about. And we should favor it as a pro-life movement. State laws that require the man, if it's confirmed by a genetic paternity test, to have excess financial responsibility both to the kid and to the mother, if the mother chooses to make the man responsible. So if she brings the child to term, the mother at her own option can make the man responsible for raising the child plus expense. What does this say? This defangs the number one objection the left has, which is it's about imposition on the woman. This says we're all in this together. It's not about men's rights or women's rights. It's about human rights, and we're all in this together. And that's how I'm not going to compromise on our pro-life principles, but reach people who, actually many of them share our pro-life instincts in common. There's a case of a pregnant woman who's assaulted and the unborn child died as a result. I haven't met one person in this country who says that criminal shouldn't be punished. That says we share the instincts in common. But it's up to us to actually walk the walk when it comes to being pro-life. As it relates to the UN, I will stop funding any institution that is hostile to U.S. sovereignty. That includes the WHO, that looks like it will include the UN, the WF, or any other institution. Regain our sovereignty and stop paying for the institutions that are hostile to it? Thank you. Great question. Sir, proud to the final word. You've got a great group together here, so thank you for that, sir.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here again. Last time you came here, we had the pride flags up here.
I remember that, driving up.
Up and
the streets, yeah.
downtown.
I see. Things have
Nothing
changed in the
against
winter.
those, but you know, our city has a policy that those are the only group that allows to fly their flags on their flagpoles. So I made a point of telling you that the only place there wasn't one was in front of our place. When I came in Friday, there was one up there. So Saturday, when they had their parade, I flew an American flag and the Gadsden flag on that pole out in front. My trial was supposed to be tomorrow, but the city's going to ask. The city's going to ask for their second continuance tomorrow. So that's what we all have to do. You spoke about we need to.
Trial for flying the American flag. Interesting.
You spoke about how we've been too quiet for too long. We need to speak up, tell
Yes.
people who we are, what we stand for. That is why this place is here. That's why we started it in 2018. And I want to thank you very much for coming here twice,
Thank you.
here to Decorah, and being here.
And I want to thank you. Give this man a round of applause for what he does every day for his children. Thank you.
I just want to encourage everybody to listen to your words, because I've been saying them for years also, that yes, it's time for us to stand up.
Yes.
Time to speak out and not let this country be taken over by people who hate us.
Yes.
And I just want to encourage all of you, this place is supported through your donations and help. And so any kind of help you could give us to keep this place open and keep doing what I believe needs to be done, and Vivek needs to be done, I would appreciate it. And again, thank you very much for coming here twice.
I
and being
appreciate
an
it.
inspiration for all of us.
Two donations. Donate to this place and donate your time on January 15th. 30 minutes of your time to save this country. And if you all do your part, our family, we will do ours, as I said, to make sure that our best days can still be ahead of us. Thank you, guys. God bless you and your families and the United States of America.